Okay, so I'll say we got that. Well, for moving, I guess we'll move forward and I'll go ahead and I'm going to introduce myself. I think everyone was on the call last time. My name is Jan Smith with Inland Management Group, and I am happy to see all of you on the call again today. And I'd like to introduce our two speakers today, and we have Rosalind. I guess you and Brooke know each other. Rosalind's been around in our town with a lot of
7 years.
Yeah, with a lot of contributions. But let me introduce you because there's some that were that don't know, maybe not familiar with you, Rosalind. So Rosalind has had over 25 years of a human resource experience as a human resource professional, with her primary focus being in the retail industry. And her resume includes Boston Stores, Macy's, TJX, my favorite, Marshalls, TJ Maxx, and home stores, right? I think it's all home goods. Yes, home goods. And then also Target stores. So Rosalind has a varied retail background. She has experience in multiple disciplines in the human resources field of so all of the things that we expect out of human resources, including training and development. So you've got a really good, great generalist background. Most recently, Rosalind owned and operated a women's apparel and accessories boutique here in Temecula, and she currently resides in Temecula with her husband, and they've lived here for 7 years. So we're welcoming you and your perspective with the major companies that you've worked with over in the past. And then I have Patricia. Patricia, do you like, I call you Trisha. Right. So she goes by Trisha, but it's Patricia Hadley. And she's a retired HR executive also here in the Temecula Valley. And Trisha has worked as a senior vice president of talent and training for credit.org. And prior to working in that was your last company, correct? That you worked for, credit.org. She also held senior positions as an HR executive at Wet Seal and Hyundai, Capital America, and HSBC, which I know you, but I don't know what HSBC is. What is that company?
It's the Hong Kong Shanghai banking system.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So, yeah.
Well, then you're seeing the world in a different perspective these days, aren't you? Trisha's career has seen her responsible for the management and direction of all aspects of human resources, training, quality and assurance as well. Her expertise includes strategic planning and budgeting, staffing, benefits, employee relations, compensation, training, safety, workers' comp, employee communications, recognition, and events. So as like Rosalind, we've got two wonderful HR representatives here to talk about the onboarding process. So Trisha's married, a mother of 4, and a proud grandmother of 11.
Yes.
Boy, Christmas around your house must be something. So again, welcome to Rosalind and Trisha. And we'll do the same format as we did last week, because we thought it kind of worked out well. If you do have questions and you'd like to ask them, you can either put those in the chat and we'll monitor that, or because it's a smaller group that's on the call today, we can just go ahead and, you can ask the question directly of the two speakers today. So last week we discussed helpful ideas to hire in this changing workplace. And I think we got some really good ideas as far as retention bonuses and things to that nature. And with all the effort in hiring, it would seem that organizations would prioritize a structured onboarding program, better known in the days past as an orientation. Yet often we see that because it takes so much time, and especially if you're a smaller company, you just kind of sometimes get them set up at their desk and give them some paperwork to fill out and read a manual, and then they're on their way. But there's such value in the onboarding. So again, if you're doing all that hiring,
Did anybody else lose Jan?
I did.
I hear you, Jen.
Okay, I'm gonna try to plug in again. Let me know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know what piece I left off on other than, if you're just working so hard to get somebody through the door, that onboarding piece is a critical component to retention, which is what we're going to talk about next week. I have seen all levels. You're going to hear from Trisha and from Rosalind this morning on their experiences and the things that we're going to talk about. But in my consulting role over the years, I've seen it done right and I've seen it not done right. The best example I can tell you about is the Walt Disney Company. I worked with them for over a decade, and their onboarding is exceptional. It's in depth, it's lengthy, but there's a reason for it. And that's why they have such low turnover in the majority of their positions. And that onboarding goes from the person who sells the ticket at the ticket reception area when you walk through the door, all the way through the back offices and everything. They've just, investment in your employee begins even before they come through the door. But that onboarding, we used to call it pixie dusting. Because that's what it was, and it works. So we're going to hear more, but again, this is such an important conversation that we're going to have this morning because of the value about onboarding. So I'll just start it off right away, and I'm going to ask Rosalind first. What do you see the value for a really effective onboarding employees? What's the value to an employer that makes you realize that's something that everybody should do when they bring in a new hire?
Well, I think first off, it sets the tone for the new hire as when they're coming into the organization. It sets up like the expectation, what the new employee can expect from the organization, and also what's going to be expected of them. There's, with their immediate supervisor and their peers. So that's the first connection. And as you mentioned, Jan, it should start before the first day on the job. So the onboarding process should start, once they've accepted that offer, like an initial telephone call from the immediate supervisor, so that they already start to feel connected. And because there's so many different dynamics in the workplace today, onboarding is critical so that associates feel connected and start to become a part of the team before they even walk in the door.
Okay, exactly. I mean, I couldn't say that I could say that better because it is this critical piece, right? Trisha, do you have anything to add to Rosalind's comments about the, why you feel it's such a value, what you've seen it, in your organizations that you worked for in the past?
Yes, I agree with, what everything Rosalind said. And I would just add that, especially I think in today's environment, a new employee really doesn't have anything invested with you yet. They don't have their tenure. There isn't a decision of leaving because, gosh, I've been here 5-10 years. I have so much in my 401k or benefits, or, I have so much vacation time built up. So this new employee has zero invested with you. So you want to make sure that they feel invested with you, that they feel as though they've made a really good decision. And as we've seen of late, and I've heard from other HR professionals that I network with, is that it really does appear that your new employee doesn't stop the job hunt just because they accepted your offer. So you want to, in a sense, kind of cut that off for them. You want them to feel invested with you and that they've made a really good decision, that they don't have to listen to any late offers that come through the doors that they might ponder and question. So that's why I feel so passionate about it, is because you want that new employee to feel as invested as that 25-year employee that's been with you.
And I really want that. Thank you, Trisha. I really want what Trisha just said to sit in just for a moment with you that are employers or business owners, because we just sat through an HR roundtable with senior HR executives this week, and Trisha and I were on that same call, and somebody said that. And I had not really thought about that, because I'm all excited as a recruiter sometimes to get the offer and the acceptance. But think about the fact that what we're seeing is they're not stopping recruiting. They might be talking to a couple of people. They want to see they'll accept your offer, but they want to see what the next offer is. So and even when they start with you, because I've had people start and resign within 3 days because a better offer came through they were waiting for, but they took the offer because they weren't sure they were going to get that other second offer. So that investment in the onboarding is the critical piece. So thank you, ladies, because it's been an eye-opening week, hasn't it, from an HR perspective, to hear what's really going on out in the industries. Yeah. So Trisha, I'll start with you on this one. In your experience, who did the onboarding? Was it the HR manager? Was it the HR staff? Was it the team leaders? And what happens if there is no HR? So it's kind of a two-part question. And so I'll be following that up with Rosalind as well. But go ahead, you can start this one.
Okay, great. It really needs to be a team effort. HR doesn't own the employee. A lot of people in companies where you have HR, sometimes that's the feeling that that's HR's job, but it isn't just HR's job. It has to be that of the entire team, the managers, the team leaders. I mean, even if you're a smaller organization, I would recommend that the CEO is involved, meaning everybody should be on board. Everybody should know who's starting and when. And that reception should be warm and inviting, that when you bring the person through that door that first day, that they're there to meet everybody. So I do believe if you have an HR person, that the HR person should really spearhead it, kind of act as the project manager, so to say, right? That you have a plan. And that's a big thing too, is to have a plan outline, really pretty much an agenda as far as, who they will meet with first. Normally it is HR, because the finishing of the paperwork, if you haven't done it online before they walk in, but to make sure that they connect with the person and you introduce them. But I think everyone needs to have a piece in it.
Okay, thank you. Rosalind, to follow that question up, what if there's no HR representation? Because some of our small businesses, they do not have HR. And so what would you recommend to them?
I would say if there's not an HR representative, then the responsibility should then be on the manager that employee is going to report directly to, or if there's an operations manager. But like Trisha said, that the ownership is not on HR, the ownership is on everybody. And some of the things that in organizations that I've worked for that we've done when there's a new employee, so that first day, it's just very quickly, all the employees that are working on that day and time, we all gather just to do an introduction so that they know who the new employee is. One of the other things that we've done, and this is an office of about 250 associates. So one of the other things that we've done is in advance, we've taken a picture of the new employee and have sent out like an introduction to the team with their pictures. So if they're not at work that particular day when we introduce the person, at least they have a photo. So now when they see them in the building, they can like, oh, that's the new person. Let me say hi. So, and as Trish said too, I think if there is HR should kind of just be like the gatekeeper, not owning it. They're there to help ensure that proper onboarding happens. And if there are any challenges and obstacles, then they should be working with the managers and supervisors to help remove those challenges and obstacles. So, and it is a team effort. And one of the things that I was going to share later is that, if it's a small organization or large, if it's small, it's kind of easier for them to like have meet and greets with specific senior level executives. So like a 30-minute meet and greet, and that's all in the schedule. But if it's a larger organization, because you talk about videos and virtual, so to have like a video message from senior level executives, and so it's allotted in the planning and the schedule that they'll view this video that gives them a message from senior level. So those are some of, that's, and then whoever is their partner, like you can call it a mentor, a coach, an onboarding buddy. So then whoever their buddy is really involved in and should understand that they have a big responsibility in helping this new person acclimate.
Well, I agree with the buddy system, Rosalind, and thank you for those comments, because I have worked prior to having a consulting company. I worked in companies, and they did have kind of an overseer. It wasn't HR, it wasn't my manager, but it was somebody who kind of led me along the first couple of days. And I think back to those days. Those are effective processes. At any role, whether it's a line personnel, a manager, or what have you. So yes, thank you for that information. Well, let's go back to something you brought up, because it was going to be a question that I was going to ask, and that was this pre-video or video. Well, there's two pieces. One is either you mentioned a pre-video message, just introducing themselves and welcoming them to the company before they even get to the onboarding process. But what are both of your opinions about video onboarding? So because you started that conversation, can you go ahead and expand in that a little bit, Rosalind? Because we're seeing more and more with the technology that people will just send it out. And so it's missing the component of that social piece to connect with their coworkers or get to know. So can you share if you experienced that or what you know of it? And if you don't, we'll go ahead and move it over to Tricia, but we'll start with you because you brought it up.
Yeah, so my experience is an onboarding program that consists of both videos and the actual personalized socialization is, from my experience, has been most effective. So during that, like the first day, so the message from the CEO, especially if the CEO is not on site. So a message from the CEO, maybe a message from like a senior level HR person. So in the video is an introduction, like the CEO welcome them on board. Could be a portion of the video could talk about the company culture. This is our culture, and other things such as corporate responsibility, what an associate can expect from the organization. So it doesn't have to be a very long video. The ones that I have participated in creating and delivering have been between 20 and 30 minutes. So, and now the new associate can put a face with some of those names that they'll hear, although they won't see them. And that's in larger organizations. So I think a video from senior management is critical, because I think it sends the message to the new hire that they know that I'm on board, that I'm part of the team now, and they want me to hear from them pretty immediately.
Okay.
So that's my opinion on videos.
Okay.
And then there are some training videos too that has, depending on what the demands of the job, part of orientation could be some training videos.
Absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing from you is a mix between the two is a good combination if you can do that.
Right.
Yeah. Tricia, what's your experience? Because you've worked in different organizations with mostly they've been large organizations. So did they use complete orientation through a training program, an online training program or a video program, or was it a combination? So yeah, what was your experience?
So obviously the much larger organizations, we had, locations throughout the United States. So I would say, even though it was larger, everybody was really onboarded in the larger ones in person, because there was usually a brick and mortar place that they were working at. I think more recently I've seen the remote work in the last few years, especially with the last organization, and especially onboarding through COVID, when people were working remote. So I would definitely say whenever you can onboard a person, to do it in person. I mean, I agree with what Rosalind says, that if there's a key person that maybe is not local or couldn't be there, or maybe there are some training videos, to do some of it, virtually, that it might be a video, but there's that personal human touch I think everybody needs to have. Even if it's a remote position, that first day or first couple of days, I think they should come in and actually connect with a person, because we are all people persons, right? I mean, we make those connections and we engage with people because we see who they are. A good example is during COVID, I did hire a sales team, and everybody was working remote and they were going to work remote. And in order to do this role, I knew that the training would be more effective if it was an in-person training. Zoom calls are great, as we all know, but all of us have, I think, realized over the last 2 years, you don't get that same type of connection through Zoom. And so, I made sure that they all felt comfortable coming in. And they came in for 30 days, even though they were going to work remote, but for 30 days they worked on site so that we could train as a group together. And that team, to this day, is still intact. And, not because I, touch base with the organization to see how that team is doing, because I felt it was really important. And especially given the fact of, these were remote jobs, but I just think that helps everybody really connect to a team if they can feel involved. So I would recommend that if you're onboarding, really try to carve out the time and have them come in and maybe pick up equipment, but just to spend that initial time with you and mix in, as Rosalind said, some of your safety training or maybe your sexual harassment training that you need to do can be done more virtually. And then those important key messages from leadership, yes. But whenever there is a connection to be done, if you could do it in person, I think would be great.
And we're not talking as much about remote workers, but we still have a majority of the workforce that does, or I would say at least a good percentage, not maybe the majority, that will be continuing to at least partially work remote. And to both of your points, what we discussed earlier, with the Disney organization, their intent of orientation was to pretty much just, hook, line, and sinker you into the organization in a positive way. In other words, these are the things that we are going to expect out of you. These are the things we give to you. These are the opportunities. These are the benefits, just everything. And it really gets you to indoctrinate yourself into the organization quickly because of all the way that their orientation went. And it was a week long for management. So, line personnel probably wasn't quite that long, but that's a long time to invest in a full week of training for management. But they wanted you to stay. And that's really what they saw, was that investment. So whether it's someone working remote these days or not, if you are simply doing the paperwork through the mail and giving them some information on who to contact if they have issues, you never get them really indoctrinated into everything, including the culture. So that's going to be my next question. Tricia, we'll just start with you on this one. How important do you think it is to indoctrinate, if you will, pixie dust, whatever you want to refer to it as, in the orientation on the culture, not just the processes?
I think it's extremely important. And if you can do that before the person walks through the door, some of the things that we have done, that if your organization, if you say, we're family owned, or we really, we value everyone as a family. When you think about personal relationships, so we think about culture of a company, but really it's really, how are you going to feel being part of that group? And it's the same thing when you have your personal relationships. If you feel that you can connect with them, if you feel that you enjoy being around them, you continue with a group of friends or a group of individuals or other clubs that you belong to. So you want that employee to feel the same way. You want them to feel good. And that's that culture. And that starts before they walk through the door. So going back to your pixie dust, Jan, some of the things that I have done in the past is even to, send them maybe a plant, welcoming them to the team. A big piece of that too is that, you want, especially now in today's world, family, partners are so important that you want them to feel like they've made a good decision too. And so when when, like, say you send a plant and the family can see, gosh, you haven't even worked there yet, and they're already sending you things. You made a good choice. They need to feel that culture. I have walked away, I'll be very honest, I have walked away as a head of HR from organizations to where they did not value people. And so you need, if your mission and your vision, you have to be able to breathe it, and you have to be able to walk it, and you have to be able to live it each day. And that employee should feel that culture before they walk through the door, because it goes back to what you said, Jan, hook, line, and sinker. If they heard this through the interview process, right? And then they show up and they don't see it, you haven't hooked them, and you're not going to sink them, because they're going to walk away from that. And I really believe that that's why people do walk away after a few days, is because, it's like a sales job, right? So, we do a good job on the recruitment process. We put a lot of time, a lot of energy into it, to where we tell them how great the job is, how great the company is, what they can expect. But then they walk through the door, and, the door that they chose isn't what they were told was going to be behind it. And that, I think, is where a lot of dissatisfaction comes from, and a lot of questioning. So back to I think the essence of your question, how important it is, it's equally important. And, last week you talked about recruiting, and today is about onboarding. And a lot of times I see companies put more effort into recruiting and then less into onboarding, but it has to be just as impactful, if not more impactful, than your recruitment.
Absolutely agreed. I'll share just a quick story, then I want to get to Rosalind on the same topic of culture. So about 20 years ago, my husband took on a new job. It was a corporate lighting company. And that week before he was to start, I had to go in for surgery. And I think he had to push his start date up because he needed to be at home to help me out. And they delivered a huge plant to me. They've never met me. They were only hiring my husband. And that plant is still alive in my house. And every time I walk up the stairs, I look at it, and I do think about that company. And it really is applicable in this conversation about the culture piece, because they chose specifically to say, we are family, and so is your wife. So, these things do make a difference with people. And especially today, in the world today, the type of people, wanting to work for a culture that means something. So Rosalind, along those lines, you worked for a lot of retail, and retail is not necessarily family run. It's a corporation. Sometimes they're even, overseas owned and things to that nature. So tell me about the culture piece. How did you see orientations going in your retail organizations that were much larger and, like I said, much more corporate run, that could really kind of profess that there's still a culture of, care or whatever that might have been?
Okay. So to tag on to some of the things that Tricia said, the culture piece is so critical, especially today, because people are looking for a culture where they can be their authentic selves and they don't have to conform one way or the other. Like, I know, like my generation, there were certain things that I might not have done until I was felt very comfortable in position. But my last organization that I worked for was TJX Companies, which owns TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and Home Goods, in addition to stores in Canada and in Europe. That culture, when I tell you, it was so strong and everybody knew it. And some of the things that we all appreciated about it is that there was an open door policy. And with that, the open door policy for that organization meant that if you had a suggestion of something that you thought would, the company could benefit for, you can set an appointment to talk to anybody in the organization that you wanted to talk to about it. It wasn't necessarily the traditional protocol of go to your manager first. That's, of course, that's how you would want it to be if, but it wasn't required. So, and if you had an issue with something, same thing, you could use the open door and you could escalate. You didn't have to go to your immediate manager first. And senior level executives made themselves available, like you said, it's a huge corporation. So they would come and visit work sites. And when they would come and visit, they would engage the, from the sales associates all the way up, and especially if they were visiting stores. My last assignment, I was a senior HR business partner in a corporate buying office downtown Los Angeles. And so when seniors came to visit, we would actually schedule roundtables so that not all associates, but like we would rotate. So associates would have an opportunity to interact with those senior level executives. And that made a huge difference. So the culture piece is so critical. And to Trisha's point, if you have a culture where you say people come first, that is evident that people come first before results. And I'll tell you, in that organization, that's how it was. I'll give you a quick example. We had a temp associate and her grandmother passed away, and her grandmother kind of raised her. Now, she was a temp. She wasn't even a regular full-time associate. We paid for her to fly out of town and back, and gave her time off, and we paid the time off too. We gave her the regular grievance time that we would give a full-time regular associate, but in addition, we also covered her travel expense. That was the culture. And when you think about that, when she tells somebody else, this is what this company did for me, how that positions the company. Like, I don't work for them anymore, but I still rave about that culture. And so in the things that we would do, like as the HR person, I would do monthly roundtables. And the way we did it is we went off of who was having a birthday in that month. So whoever was having a birthday in that month, they were invited to come to the roundtables. And it wasn't a gripe session. You couldn't come and just gripe. It was a session just to share ideas and thoughts. And if somebody had an issue, and if they brought it up, they wouldn't get shut down. It would just be like, for this particular platform, we want to keep it to whatever it was, but I want you to make an appointment to come and see me so that we can talk about what your concern is. So culture is so critical. And then also it needs to be all inclusive. Everybody needs to feel like they are important and that they have, like, everybody's going to be treated the same. Like currently I'm training, doing diversity and inclusion training for some pretty large companies. And the focus is, do our company really represent what EEO stands for? EEO, Equal Employment Opportunities. So yes, and everybody should feel that way. And they should feel like, that they are judged objectively based on their performance. And that's the culture, that I know that I'm going to be judged fairly in this organization. Part of the culture is, if it's a culture that allows for career advancement. Some small companies don't necessarily have a lot of career advancement opportunities, but if they can't advance, really engaging the associates and find out what are their talents, what else do they bring to the table that they can, make it part of their job, to enhance their job, to make their job more fun for them. So culture is critical. And if just me personally, if I joined an organization and I didn't think it was a good cultural fit, then like Tricia said, that would be a company that I would have to walk away from.
Well, it sounds, and thank you for all that information, because it's such great perspective with this larger company environment. Even though we have more small businesses here in town and those that are even on the call, a lot of these, what Rosalind shares can be extended even to a small company. And one of the questions, Wendy, I see that you have a question. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Rosalind, because it's been ingrained in us in all of these webinars and seminars that I've been to, that if you do for one, you have to do for all of them. And that's caused an issue. So now you've got this one temp person that the company did all this for. Do they have to do it for every other temp that comes on board now? Because that legality has been ingrained in me in every single thing that I've ever been into, every webinar. So there's many times where we've got an employee that's gone above and beyond, and we want to go above and beyond, but we realize if we do, then we have to do it for everybody.
And Rosalind, before you answer, just so because we do have kind of a little bit of an agenda with questions, if you wouldn't mind answering Wendy's question, but very briefly, because we only have 20 more minutes and we do have a few more things we want to talk about with the orientation piece, but it's a good question and it might be a question others are thinking about. So if you wouldn't mind answering it just very briefly, and then we could even connect you with Wendy to kind of expand on that at a later time.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Rosalind.
It's been a long time since I've seen you.
A couple of years.
I know, right? You know what? When you talk about treating everybody the same and treating them fairly, that's more geared around like performance. All performance reviews should be objective and based on the individual's performance. It shouldn't be like a halo effect performance review or a horns effect, if you know what I mean when I say halo and horns. I'll explain that a little later. But as far as when there are some exceptions, it is not setting what is traditional. So things are situational sometimes, and sometimes you have to take isolated situations and do business accordingly, and what the company can is able to do at any given time. So the situation with the temp who needed to go to her grandmother's funeral, she was a temp. She did not have money for an immediate airfare. So we take isolated incidents and it become a part of the norm necessarily. But when you have a culture where everybody knows, if I need something, I can go to my company and they will do their best to try to accommodate me. So keep in mind, there are certain things that just happens periodically, not all the time, or it could just happen once, but then the things that you do consistently, as far as how you reward associates for performance, how you write performance reviews, how you give time off, all of that, there are laws pertaining to like time off and whatnot. So you follow the laws, but also allow for flexibility to meet your associates where they're at any particular time.
Well, thank you so much, because these two speakers that we have today are just so filled with so much information, and just kind of tying it up to this whole culture piece with the onboarding. I think the most important thing to remember is if you're espousing that you are a family business, or you have a culture of whatever that might look like, that you carry that through in everything that you're doing, and you start it at the very beginning with the orientation. So, walk the walk, and talk the talk, I think.
Yes, because I don't want to forget this before we move away from culture, because part of culture. Every organization that I've ever worked for has their own language, right? To a degree. Like I've worked in various big boxes from Target to Macy's to TJX companies, and they all have their own language and acronyms. So as part of your culture, whatever the like certain terms and definitions that you use, it's important that you provide your new associate. I kind of call it like a book of acronyms, like whatever it is, when you're not saying the whole thing, because I can misinterpret something just because I don't know the definition. So in the onboarding process, please make sure to include a book of acronyms.
That's a good point, because you can tell them to go do something on a particular software package, or can even be narrowed down to something like that. So that orientation, you're hearing, those that are on the call today, you are hearing how important the extensive thought process is to planning one and to making it effective. So great conversation and thought over being very thoughtful in the way that, again, you structure your orientation. So let's move on. Trisha, I'm going to ask you this question. When you were working in the companies that you've been in, how did you find the assessment of your own program that you put together, your own orientation and onboarding? How did you know it was effective? What kind of tools did you use to see, am I doing the right thing? Did I schedule things correctly? Did I plan this agenda? Was it even effective? So if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Certainly. So, a lot of the ways that you can, for your owners, your executives, they're going to want to know how effective things are, and they're going to look at numbers. So obviously, if you run turnover numbers, we ran turnover numbers overall, and then we ran new hire turnovers, and we would break it down to, turnover within 90 days, 6 months, and a year. And you could see whether they were improving or staying flat, or if they were getting worse. But a big piece of that, Jan, for assessing is just asking for feedback. Sometimes people just feel like I've got the best tool out there and it's going to work, but you have to stop and ask for feedback. And that's for asking for feedback all the way around. I would ask for feedback from the new hire. I would meet with the new hires touch base with them during the week and just ask them, how is it going? I would have a copy. We called it the induction, not necessarily the onboarding plan, but I would have a copy of their induction plan. And I would just kind of spot check to see, how did it go here? Did you meet with it? It also helps to find out if, your plan or the plan that you put together with your team went off the rails, or if it didn't. And then I would also have meetings and ask for assessment from the managers, those involved in the induction employee. How is it working? Was there enough time allotted for this area? What would you add? What would you take away? There's this process of stop, start, continue, right? And I think it's a really good thing for anything to do, to go through and say, okay, do we start doing something? Do we stop doing something? Do we continue? I think with any induction onboarding, you have to be flexible and adaptable. And if you're not assessing it, then I think you are missing the boat on that. But you really need to stop and assess it by asking questions of everyone involved, including that new hire. And if you do lose somebody within, say, that 30, 60, 90 days, even up to a year, you want to curtail your exit interview a little bit differently. It doesn't have to be the same type of exit interview that you have for someone who's leaving after 10 years, and that maybe they're leaving for career growth. Ask the hard questions. If you can learn something from an employee that's leaving, it's a win, because hopefully then you don't repeat that mistake with the next person who walks through the door.
And that includes that they didn't feel that they got the information necessary on the front end, perhaps.
Correct.
Yeah. Rosalind, do you have anything to add to what Trisha says in terms of trying to figure out if what you're actually doing is effective and a good use of time, and actually, gets that employee to be, part of your organization quickly? Do you have any further comments on that.
I think Trish kind of covered most of it. The only other thing that we used to do is we would do a retention assessment. And so that would be at the end of the orientation, because I'll just tell you, in TJX Corporation, when I transferred from one position to another position, like I had stepped out of HR for a minute. I was managing, I launched and managed the TJX Rewards credit card program. So I did that for like 3 years. And then I went back into HR, and that's when I went to the buy-in office as a senior HR business partner. And so I had to onboard in that new assignment. And because of the demands of my role, I onboarded in for like 3 months. And so with that is, so we did like formal, like the manager would meet, to Trisha's point, with the new associate would meet with whomever was assigned to be their onboarding buddy. So you're getting feedback all the time. And then as the HR person, I would meet with all of them as well and ask for feedback. So the critical thing is that communication and asking for feedback, and them understanding you want the good, bad, and the ugly, so that you can address any issues that may be happening. And then whatever the good, that you can leverage that. How can I enhance this? If this is really working, how can we leverage that piece of it? So Trish covered everything that I would have said.
Okay. All right, I'll go continue on the questioning, or just seeking more information from you two that have been in the workforce environment, in what I call captive roles, working for companies for years and years. And that is, why do you think companies don't do this? Why do you think? Because I know companies that don't do it. They just bring them in, they allow them to, sometimes they don't even have an office set up for them. They have a temporary space for them if they're an office environment, if they're in an office environment. And there's nothing that says welcome. It's just, you're another human being.
Your warm body.
Yeah, you're a warm body. As I say, you fog the mirror, you got hired. And now go for it. But yeah, curious, and this is kind of impromptu for both of you, Trisha and Rosalind, but why do you think companies don't do it? So Rosalind, you want to take it, and then we'll let you also give feedback from what you've seen, because you guys have worked you've had a long history in HR, so it's going to be a good perspective, this question.
To be honest, Jan, I think a lot of companies just don't know how important it is, for whatever reason. Maybe whoever the most senior level individuals are in the organization never experienced it in their work life, so they don't know how to bring it to the team. And if it's a company that doesn't have HR, then surely there might be some opportunities there. Just not knowing how critical it is, or knowing how to put the program, how to put it together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And so that's, that's the only thing I could think of as to why, that understanding of how important it is.
Okay. And Trisha, do you want to add to that?
I agree. I think they don't realize how important. I think it goes back to what I said before. We spend a lot of time, effort into recruitment, and then we think that's it, that we've hired the person and it can end there. And we don't realize that the bigger piece is yet to come, from when we start them in. I think also it comes down to time. They feel like they're just too busy. You have too much on your plate. And I can certainly understand that, everybody's very, very busy. And how can you carve out time to clean out that desk? But that's where, you really have to have that outline, and you have to have that list so that you're following it. Because you need to recognize that, yes, you might need to spend more time here, but think about it. If you invest the time in that person, then, they're going to stay in the seat and they're going to do a good job. But if you don't invest, then you're going to be spending more time, because you're going to have a vacant seat again. You're going to be covering the duties for that person. Plus, if you're a manager, you're going to be called out for interviewing again. So it's really pointing out, and if there is an HR at the organization, it is about explaining and really educating and giving knowledge to the person as to why this investment of this time is so important. Or if you don't have HR, if you're here on this call today in this Zoom, sharing that with your coworkers and your management team that, this is something we need to start investing in. It's just as important. You take it back to if you have it, and I'm not sure all the organizations that are on the phone, or on the Zoom thing, but if you have a sales team, every effective sales team starts every morning with a huddle to talk about the day and the plan. If they don't do that, then the day isn't as effective. So it goes back to that of paralleling why this time is so important and what the end result will be for you.
Okay. All right. Well, I have time for one more question. I think it's probably the most, we've touched on it, but I think it's so applicable still in this, year, 2 years of mostly remote workers for those that are not customer facing positions, like the hospitality industry particularly. But how do you think I guess the question I have is, do you feel it's as important? Rosalind, you touched on it, but I want to just kind of circle back because again, this remote piece is still prevalent. Do you feel it's not just the technical orientation that a remote worker should have, but the social piece? Or is it, should it be more heavily the social piece and the technical piece? I just want to kind of follow up with that because I know we are still having issues, and those that will watch the video at a later time, they could still have remote workers. So I just want to finish our last question on, the social, the technical, how do you really do a great job, and even keeping that person engaged in those first few months that is remote, so they feel part of the team. So it's a long-winded question, but Tricia, do you want to start, and then we'll finish it up with Rosalind.
Sure. I'll go back to, I feel it's very important. Obviously, if you have somebody who's, really remote in another state, you can't bring them in person. Mm-hmm. Then you do the next best thing is you make sure that there are Zoom meetings and the camera's on. Don't allow the employees not to, put up their face in their video, and don't do it to them either. Don't have your name up there or just a profile picture. Make sure that they're engaging. If this is the engagement and the social pieces, the Zoom is the best you can do because of distance, then absolutely do that. But I am a firm believer that the more social engagement you can have versus, technical, do it on your own. You really, it needs to be heavily weighted more of that personal contact. You need to give that personal contact to the person.
Okay. All right. And Rosalind, we'll let you finish up.
Okay. Well, Tricia made a good point earlier too, when she said that although an associate was going to be working remote, that they had them to come into the office for the first 30 days. So even if they're going to be a remote associate, if there's opportunities, especially in the beginning, for them to come into the office, because that personal socialization is just as important as the technical piece. Like, technical is something you can learn, right? But connections, you can't learn connections. That requires a little more touching and feeling, for lack of better words. And so just as an existing employee who transfers to a new department can become disconnected, truly a new associate who's going to be remote can feel very disconnected if the onboarding isn't done properly. So some of the things that can be included is, making sure that their email is working before their first start day. If whatever like webcasts that are going on, internal platforms, make sure that they have all the connections. And if they're remote, but they're within the same geographical location and the company has a budget for it, maybe the manager, along with some of the existing employees, maybe they get together with that person, go out for lunch for like a meet and greet or something, just so that you have that opportunity to touch and feel. And if, to Trisha's point, if they're going to be remote and you're having video calls, ensuring that the camera is on. When the camera is off, you can be so disconnected. So ensuring that the camera is on, and setting times, just like if you were on site, setting times for those formal touch bases to ensure that they're getting what they need, that they're not feeling disconnected, that their questions are being answered, even, with the buddy, with the manager, and then HR, if there is an HR person, making sure that they have those regular touch bases too. And if it's remote, it really should be a little longer than if it's on site.
Well, I liked your story, and thank you so much for those comments, because what resonates in the earlier conversation you had is that when you changed a department, and given the TJX organization's huge, but when you changed a department or came back into the organization to a different department, even though you had been working for one company, that they gave you an orientation. So that's something, it's a great final thought on that, is how important the orientation process is. So
Right.
I want to thank both of you for participating, and everyone being on the call today, and those that will listen to the call later, how important the orientation is. Are there any questions before we finish up? Okay, so Brooke, we have one final part of
Wendy
this.
that's a clapping hand.
Oh, Wendy, yes, Wendy. Wendy's clapping. I have to still get used to those little icons.
The reactions.
The reactions. Our final session will be next week, and we will be talking about retention. So, we've kind of come full circle with getting people hired, getting people connected, and our last piece will be on retention. So we hope those that are on the call and those that will watch this later will join us next Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. So thank you all so much for joining. And
I just want to say, Brooke
Yes.
has my contact information. So if anybody wants to have a conversation, about anything as it relates to HR, you can reach out to Brooke and she can provide you with my contact information.
That's a good point. Brooke has contact for everybody on the call as well. So thank you, Michelle, for organizing it through VTV, and Brooke through the Chamber for this series that you presented thus far.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Hope to see you
Thank
next
you.
week.